Welcome to Latkes and Ketchup, the official podcast of Congregation Beth Israel in Charlottesville, Virginia. My name is Rabbi Ezra Leventhal, serving as your host. And today, as our very first guest, we have Rabbi Tom Gutherz. Hi, Rabbi Tom.
Hi, Ezra. Great to see you.
Great to see you, too. We see each other pretty regularly. If you are a regular attendee of Congregation Beth Israel, you know that Rabbi Tom is our senior rabbi. Anything you would like the listeners of the podcast to know about you, Rabbi Tom?
Well, I'm happy that we are finally doing this podcast together and that you've taken the lead to get our voices out here on the radio and on the airwaves.
On the Spotify, on the wherever you're listening to this.
And I've been here at Congregation Beth Israel for about 20 years. I'm coming on my 20th year, finishing that up. And so happy that we're going to have this conversation this morning.
Yeah. So just to give a little recap of what we're doing here on Latkes and Ketchup, if you have questions about the name of the podcast, go ahead and listen to the teaser. I won't describe it in too much detail again. But on every episode, we bring a latke and some ketchup. And the latke is a story from Jewish tradition that inspires us or intrigues us, and the ketchup is story from pop culture or, anything that's not necessarily Jewish that somehow connects to that. So, Rabbi Tom, did you bring the latke or the ketchup?
Well, Rabbi Ezra, I brought the latke today.
Yes, you did. So that means that I brought the ketchup. And true to form, we're going to start with the latke. So, Rabbi Tom, take it away. What did you bring as our latke today?
So the latke that I want to bring to our conversation is a very, very obscure Jewish holiday called Tu B'Av.
Tu B'Av.
Tu B'Av. And since we are sitting here today, actually on the day of Tu B'Shvat, and tomorrow we're going to have our Tu B'Shvat Seder here at CBI, and it happens to be Valentine's Day. So I thought there was a nice coincidence in the fact that Tu B'Av, which is exactly 16 months,
6 months?
6 months away from Tu B'Shvat, is today referred to as the holiday of love, or the Jewish Valentine's Day.
A Valentine's Day for Jews. How nice.
Yes, and it's also a very, very good example of a holiday that was once formally on the calendar, but whose significance and origin kind of faded away completely, and which in modern times has been revived and given entirely new meaning. So I thought that would be something we could talk about a little bit.
Yeah, I know a little bit about Tu B'Av. I know that it's Jewish Valentine's Day. I know that there is dancing involved.
Well, let me first say Tu B'Av. Av is the month of Av, the Jewish month of Av, and Tu is gematria for the 15th day of the month of Av. So just like Tu B'Shvat is the 15th day of the month of Shvat, Tu B'Av was an ancient holiday that fell 6 months later on the 15th day of the month of Av. And yes, it has something to do with dancing. We don't really know the origins of the holiday, and quite frankly, even the Talmud, which was written about 1,500 to 2,000 years ago, doesn't really know what the holiday was about, because they asked the question there, what is Tu B'Av, right? And they give an answer. They say something very unusual. They say, Israel, the people of Israel, had no greater days of joy than the 15th of Av, Tu B'Av, and Yom Kippur.
Wow, that sounds pretty bleak for the Jewish people.
Well, get the rest of it. They say, for on those days, the daughters of Israel would go out dressed in white, in borrowed garments, in order not to shame anyone who didn't have a suitable white dress, and they would go out and dance in the vineyards.
Yes, this is what I know of Tu B'Av. I think there's dancing, and I think that there's maybe some men around the dancing.
Yes. And when the girls would go out dancing in white dresses in the vineyards, The men would go out and either watch or take part. You know how that is at a dance. Sometimes you're watching, sometimes you get into the mix.
A very straight dance in this case. But
yeah, in this case. But they would actually say something when the men would come looking for a suitable soulmate. They would say, "Young man, lift your eyes and see what you choose for yourself. Don't set your eyes only on beauty. Rather, set your eyes on family. For grace is false and beauty is vain. But a woman who reveres God, a woman who has a great soul, she will be praised."
I love that they can tell, the content of her soul and the ability she has to raise a family through her dance moves.
I like that idea. I also like the idea that why did they wear borrowed dresses? And why did they wear all white dresses? It was so that there would be no distinction between rich and poor. And there was no jewelry, no anything. It's just you, that borrowed white dress, and the music and the vibes and the dancing. And you know how that goes. Sometimes you just know when you dance with somebody that person's the one.
It's a really optimistic view of a dance party, and I love that. I love that for us as Jewish people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what the Talmud says, right? And we'll circle back maybe, the other thing that I always struck me as unusual about this passage from the Mishnah is that it's not just Tu B'Av, which is a happy day. I mean, you imagine a dance party out in the fields. Yeah, that's going to be a happy time. But what's the deal about the afternoon of Yom Kippur?
We going to add a dance party to your text study every year?
It seems so different from Yom Kippur as we understand it today, which we call a day of awe, a day of fear, a day of worry. So this little passage in the Talmud gives us a little insight into also what Yom Kippur was like back in the day. And the way I understand it is that there was such a faith and a confidence and belief in two things. One being God's willingness to forgive us and to be reconciled with us. And the second being the efficacy, the power of doing the ritual in the right way, that, when the priest went into the Holy of Holies and offered the sacrifice and asked for forgiveness on behalf of the people, of course, God forgives them. And let's go party.
Yeah.
Like in the afternoon, once all the ritual is done, they would go out into the fields and dance and choose a life partner to kind of continue going out in life and living.
And we still have that tradition of wearing white. At least some people still honor that tradition to mimic the death shroud, as Yom Kippur is understood as a rehearsal for our own deaths. And I think that the idea of, we're rehearsing for our own deaths. We are imagining what it would be like if we were to die in this moment, and we're dancing. Spectacular, the spiritual resonance of that.
Yeah, very, very powerful affirmation of life in the awareness of death.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so where did all of this celebration come from? Do we have any sort of root in the text for Tu B'Av?
Well, here's the thing. It's actually, as you start to dig a little bit further, there are other Talmudic passages that mention the reason for Tu B'Av. And one of them says something that kind of got me really into a big rabbit hole, looking up the answer to it. But it said that this was the day on which it was permitted again for the tribes of ancient Israel to marry with the Benjaminites. So when I went back into the Bible to look for that story about the tribes and the Benjaminites, it took me to the book of Judges, actually the very last story in the entire book of Judges. And Rabbi Ezra, this is a story that they did not teach us in rabbinical school.
Oh, no.
And I had never encountered this story before, and I was literally aghast. I can't even tell you the whole story, but I can summarize it for you.
Yeah, we'll give the people a taste.
A taste.
Yeah.
So it's a long story, but it involves a horrible, horrible act of violence against against a woman, a concubine of a man from a different tribe who was staying overnight in a town of the Benjaminites. And the act was so horrible. It was an act of sexual violence, and it resulted in death.
Oh, gosh.
And the man, after he returned to his hometown, he put out a call to all the tribes of Israel, saying, "This is what these men have done from this tribe of Benjamin. What are you going to do about it?" And to make the story short, the rest of the tribes waged war against the Benjaminites, asking for the perpetrators to be handed over, and the Benjaminites do not hand them over. And so there's a series of wars or battles between the tribes, at the end of which the tribes vow that none of them will ever give a daughter to a Benjaminite.
Wow. So that would mean the end of the descendants of Benjamin.
Yes.
Eventually.
Yeah. And eventually they realized exactly what you said, that this would be the end of the tribe, and that they couldn't do that either. But they had made a vow.
Right.
And so they needed to find a way to get around the vow. And that's when the book of Judges tells us that in those days there was a feast of the Lord, and the young girls would go out dancing in the field. And they suggest to the Benjaminites that they go out into the fields when the women have gone out to celebrate this holiday in the vineyards and the fields.
And now they've got their loophole. Now they can marry into the other tribes on this one day.
Because the tribes have not given them, but the Benjaminites, we presume, have taken them. Okay.
So perhaps there's some violence encoded in there.
Yes, I'm not always sure that that every woman who went out dancing from Shiloh wanted to become a Benjaminite.
Whew.
Oof.
My goodness. So Jewish Valentine's Day really starts as this go out and kind of dance at your own risk holiday.
Yeah. And then already by the time of the Talmud, hundreds or thousands of years later, it's kind of become a dance of joy, maybe the original meaning of the holiday. Like, why was there a holiday on the 15th of Av? The book of Judges doesn't say why. Mm-hmm. But there must have been this ancient holiday. It must have involved dancing. And by the time of the Talmud, it's become kind of, as you said before, a celebration of life and an affirmation of love and new beginnings on the day of Yom Kippur, and also at this time of Tu B'Av.
Yeah.
So that holiday itself had been renewed already 2,000 years ago. But then Tu B'Av kind of disappears from Jewish life completely. I was looking this up in a book that I had that was published in 1988 in Israel. And in the book, it says just like that. This is a completely and totally forgotten holiday.
Wow.
So sometime between 1988 and today, somehow Jewish culture, religion, Israeli society, modern Judaism picked up on sort of this holiday that had like a good vibe to it.
Yeah.
And kind of made it into, like, if you Google today, Tu B'Av, Jewish Valentine's Day, you'll come up with the holiday of love.
We don't need to think about the death part. We just need to think about the dresses and the dancing.
Yeah.
It's Jewish Valentine's Day.
Right. And
party.
And if you grew up in Israel in the past 20 years, Tu B'Av are these big dance festivals out in the desert and out in the fields, and it's like all-night rock parties, and it's kind of become, it's a good example of a holiday whose meaning maybe was lost in the sands of time, but which was taken and resuscitated and given new meaning in modern life. By the way, also parallel to Tu B'Shvat, which once was just a day on the tax calendar, the day on which you begin the tithing, and in modern times has become a very, very meaningful and significant holiday that has to do with nature and reverence for nature, and there's a Kabbalistic tie-in to it. So
yeah,
a good example of how the tradition kind of reinvents itself and how things that we thought were a dead letter somehow get new life.
Ugh, Jewish life finds a way.
So that's my latke.
What a nice latke. Very crispy, well-seasoned, excellent start. You ready for some ketchup?
I'm ready for some ketchup.
Begrudgingly, I suppose, since it's not an appropriate condiment for a latke.
I don't want to say it's transgressive, but it's what Jewish culture does. It's always changing and adapting.
I've been called many worse things than transgressive, so I'll take transgressive. All right, so I really feel like our selection for the first episode is really ironic because you have brought a brutal Torah horror story, and I've brought a folk song from the 1970s.
Ooh.
And I think that really anyone would have expected the reverse to be true, but here we are. So I would like to talk to you about the song Dancing in the Moonlight by King Harvest.
Cool.
How familiar are you with this song?
I could probably sing a little bit of the chorus with you. That's probably it.
All right, we going to try and do a little bit of the chorus right now? Maybe just to jog people's memories a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
All right. Dancing in the moonlight, everybody's feeling warm and bright. It's such a fine and natural sight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. All right, so you might recognize that from, it's been in quite a few TV shows and movies. Recently, it was in the Umbrella Academy. I think it was in the video game version of Guardians of the Galaxy, something like that. I looked up a list of references before we came here, but, those are the ones that really stick out to me. So, obviously, as you can tell by the chorus, this song is really bright and shiny, right? We're dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's feeling warm and bright. The other lines of the song say things like, we like our fun and we never fight. You can't dance and stay uptight. It is definitely giving off the vibe of a big raucous dance party going on. The music is just kind of light and fun. Nothing too heavy to it. This is a song that I grew up with. My mom really loves this song. And the reason I associate it with Tu B'Av is not just because, they were literally dancing in the moonlight, but long, long ago, several genders ago, as I like to say, I used to be in a Rosh Hodesh group, which is a group that comes together to celebrate the first of the month. Traditionally, it's a women's kind of group. And my group came together a while ago to celebrate Tu B'Av, and we all danced to this song together. It was not in the moonlight, but we were evoking the spirit by just the vibe and the words of the song.
Beautiful.
So it's a sweet memory for me. But this song has a really interesting backstory to it that you would not expect, kind of like the holiday of Tu B'Av itself. So the version of this song that became famous is sung by King Harvest, and there was another cover by Top Loader that a lot of people know, but it was originally recorded by a band called Boffalongo.
Boffalongo.
Have you ever heard of Boffalongo?
Am I expected to know that?
No, you are not expected to know that.
Then no, I've never heard of Boffalongo.
Honestly, I had never heard of Boffalongo until I was double-checking my research for this story. So the lead singer of Boffalongo is a man named Sherman Kelly. And in the year 1969, he was on a Caribbean vacation in St. Croix. And he was at this big raucous party, as you might expect by the lyrics in this song, when something horrible happened to him. He was actually attacked by a gang of 8 men. These 8 men were a gang around St. Croix that would pick on tourists. They actually later went on to commit a mass shooting a few days later. So Sherman Kelly is one of the first known victims of this gang. And while he's at the party, he's pulled aside by these men and brutally, brutally beaten. So after they take him for everything that he's worth, they just leave him to bleed out and die next to this big beach party in St. Croix. And he cries out for help after they leave, but no one hears him. And he's lying there, assuming he's about to die, watching this party go on beside him, and has this moment of just kind of revering life and thinking about how he might be fading away, his self might be gone very soon, but people are still dancing and people are still living and loving and having this wonderful experience. And it really just kind of gave him a renewed sense of life and a renewed sense of purpose. And obviously he did end up surviving. Someone did find him and revive him. And he went on to write this very uplifting, hopeful pop song about his near-death experience at the hands of violence.
Wow.
Yeah.
So think of how that circles back, how that ketchup is going to look good on this latke. I mean,
yeah.
You know, both this idea of, you know, with that awareness or the thought of death, and yet being able to kind of touch and feel, you know, that life inside, the dancing, the germ of that song came from that moment, like we have a little bit on Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
You know, with that, the joy and the awareness of our own mortality kind of rolled into one, and also the new life.
Yeah, I think that there's something really interesting specifically about the fact that both of them kind of wander into the romantic and, you know, potentially procreative aspect of the romantic, to put it in a unnecessarily verbiage kind of way. But the song is really specifically talking about a couple that is getting along so well. We like our fun and we never fight. They don't bark and they don't bite. Keep things loose, keep things light. It's always in this kind of plural first person of a romantic couple just getting along and dancing in the moonlight.
Yeah, and it's also, you know, I happened to look at the music video for this, and there's, you know, each time they do the chorus and each time they do the verses again, you know, more people are joining. It's sort of a song of like this beautiful, beautiful openness, which is kind of what you feel sometimes at a dance party, that everybody's got a place on the dance floor and everybody can be together, and yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and in one of its recent usages in the Umbrella Academy, which I mentioned earlier, which I think the music video you're referencing is the one by Top Loader, which is the one that was created for the Umbrella Academy.
I think it's by King Harvest.
Oh, is the King Harvest one?
I think it's the King Harvest one.
That would be early for a music video. Anyway, so in the Umbrella Academy, it's used as this moment of like people coming together in this exact same way.
Yeah.
Because the Umbrella Academy is about these siblings that, you know, have their tensions between each other and can't always get along and have this very traumatic past, but they're trying to come together and kind of understand each other again. So, yeah, I love that we're seeing all of these parallels, you know, from ancient times and modern times, that death and violence and horror can lead us to such a, you know, lighthearted mood.
Yeah, and that we can take sometimes these horrible stories or even horrible experiences that we've had and find somehow the kernel of beauty and good in them and give them another shape and maybe even, you know, lift up the sparks that are in them.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of all of those horror movies that they create around Valentine's Day, you know.
Yeah. And you know, you talked about your Rosh Chodesh group.
Yeah.
It's not Rosh Chodesh, but it'll be the 15th of the month is Tu B'Shvat.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a full moon.
Oh.
That's why a lot of the Jewish holidays take place on the 14th or the 15th day of the lunar month. So everybody who hears this podcast, we invite you to just go out and dance in the moonlight.
Go out and dance in the moonlight. Think about death and life and love and get your groove on.
That sounds great.
All right. Okay, well, to close things out from our very fruitful conversation, our very fruitful dip of latke into ketchup, Rabbi Tom, what do you eat on your latkes?
So on my latkes, my favorite topping is sour cream with a little bit of caviar.
Caviar?
I mean, not the really expensive caviar. I'm not in that league, but you know, they have that lumpfish caviar that some of the stores carry next to the tuna fish. So a little black lumpfish caviar, and yeah, I do a little bit of sour cream, and then just for that little, you know, that little pop of fizz, I put a little bit of caviar on. That's my latke topping.
Very salty, very posh. All right, thank you so much for listening. This has been Latkes and Ketchup. I'm Rabbi Ezra Leventhal. I'm gonna dip.